The words that you hear have longer lasting implications than that of physical violence. You have to ask the right questions in order to get the right answers.
Yes.
I was asking the wrong questions, and I wasn't really diving into what was happening to me. So I was really believing he was going to change.
Welcome to the Be Better broadcast. Today, we are joined by Michelle Jewsbury, who is an international philanthropist, a speaker, an author, and a coach. In July of 2017, Michelle founded Unsilenced Voices, a 501c3 nonprofit focused on inspiring change in communities around the globe by encouraging victims to break free and survivors to speak up about domestic violence and sexual assault. Recognized as a valuable resource in the speaking industry, Michelle is the go-to professional speaker who uses her story of survival as encouragement and motivation for others. Today is a very, very important subject and topic to talk about that is not talked about enough. And in just a few minutes, I'm going to share some stats with you that may surprise you. But whether you're someone who is going through domestic violence or sexual assault, or maybe you don't even know that's what you're going through, or maybe you know someone who's going through it and you want to provide them and help them with resources or whatever it may be, then this conversation is going to be for you. When you take away something from this conversation with Michelle, all that we ask is you share this show with just one other person who could use it as well. You are the reason the Be Better broadcast has grown the way that we've grown over the past 2 years to nearly 300 episodes. I think this is episode 299, which is wild. It might be 298. It might be 300. I'm not sure yet. But regardless, you're the reason we've grown because you are the best part of the Be Better team. And we are grateful for you. So without further ado, let's talk to Michelle. Michelle, it's great to have you on the show all the way from Tampa, Florida.
Yeah, super excited to be here. Thank you so much, Brandon.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to have you. The very first thing I like to do actually is I'd like to share a few stats for those who are tuning in and listening. And if you're watching, then you'll be able to see these on the screen. If you're listening, then I'm going to read them now for you. But when it comes to domestic violence and sexual assault, on average, nearly 20 people per minute are physically abused by an intimate partner in the U.S. During 1 year, this equates to more than 10 million women and men. And the next stat I'll share in the last one, because there's many of them, you can read them if you go on YouTube and watch the show. 1 in 4 women and 1 in 9 men experience severe intimate partner physical violence, intimate partner contact, sexual violence, and or intimate partner stalking with impacts such as injury, fearfulness, PTSD, and other things that are mentioned here. So the reason I bring this up is because it is such an important topic, yet I feel that this is something that's not talked about enough. So Michelle, I'm just super grateful that you're here today to share your very sensitive story that you've shared so much, and it's very strong of you to share. I'm sure you're told that all the time. So again, thank you for being on the show.
No, thank you. I'm very excited to be here. It's an honor to be able to speak because this isn't about me. It's not about what I've been able to do, but it's about what your audience can do. It's about when people go through an experience that they are able to use that experience to better the world and to not allow those situations to define them. So.
Absolutely. Well said. So your mission now to help these victims and survivors of domestic abuse, sexual assault, it comes from personal experience. Are you open to sharing a bit about your story to give those viewers and listeners a background of who you are and what you've been through?
Yeah, definitely. If you want, I can just jump right in, Brandon.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. So let's see. Actually, I'm just going to start from the beginning. I was born in 1983, so this ages me a little bit, to two amazing parents in northern Idaho. They're no longer with us, and I miss them very, very much. I love my mom and dad dearly, but I still hear them, say, "Go, girl, go." And I remember growing up, my daddy was military, moved around my whole life, and I learned to make friends, unmake friends, remake friends. However, I didn't experience any violence in the home. I didn't experience my mom or my dad yell at each other or lift their hands to one another in physical or emotional abuse. So Fast forward my life, I decide to move to Hollywood, California to pursue an acting career when I'm 20 years old. And, I think I'm on my way to stardom. I'm starring in independent plays and films and doing everything that I need to do. And then I end up meeting somebody, this somebody who swept me off my feet. This was many years later. So in 2011, and he courted me and sent me gifts and flowers and took me to ball games and took me to concerts, and he won over that courtship. And in January of 2012, we began dating. And roughly about 4 months into that relationship was the first sign of physical violence. And he had pushed me so hard against a wall that my head went through it. And I didn't understand what I was going through because I didn't grow up with this. I didn't face this. You don't know what you don't know. And I remember he had pushed me, and I looked behind me after my head had caused the indentation, and I just thought to myself that I need to patch the wall, not that I need to run. And I ended up staying with him for over 4 years, where I endured all forms of domestic violence, which are physical, sexual, emotional, and financial abuse. And finally, when I escaped and ran away from that situation, I started to document my story. And I guess we can jump into the what happened because of or in spite of conversation here. However, I realized that when I read that story back to myself, it wasn't me. And it shocked me. And I knew I had to do something more in spite of what it is that I went through.
Wow. When you say that, when you read that story back and you realized that wasn't me, what exactly does that mean?
So I started to document my story. My therapist had encouraged me to write. And when I wrote out what had happened to me, the abuse, the everything, all forms of the domestic violence, just the situation in general, the red flags, the isolation, everything, I couldn't believe it was me that I was reading about. So what transpired actually is my theater arts background. I wrote and performed a 65-minute solo play in 2016 called But I Love Him, and performing that at the Whitefire Solo Fest and the Hollywood Fringe Festival. And that's when people started coming up to me and telling me their stories of abuse. And you read the statistics earlier. 1 in 4 women, 1 in 9 men in the US experience domestic violence. 1 in 3 women worldwide experience this injustice. And this includes, sexual, financial, emotional. There's all facets of domestic violence. And when I performed that, it really brought people to the table who wanted to speak up and share. And I knew I had to do something even more. And that's why in 2017, I founded Unsilenced Voices. And we began in West Africa, so in Ghana, and then Sierra Leone, Rwanda. And in 2022, we gifted over $33,000 to U.S. survivors, not just of DV, but also of human trafficking and sexual abuse that they were able to use for relocation, transportation, housing, and childcare needs.
That's so beautiful. And it's such a gift that you're able to provide to the world. And if you didn't have those experiences, then Unsilenced Voices wouldn't be what it is. And you're just at the beginning now, which is fantastic.
We are just at the beginning. We are actually taking a minor pause. So instead of trying to jump in and blow up right now, we are maintaining what we have in Sierra Leone at the moment, which is our Sponsor a Survivor program. You can find it at sponsораsurvivor.org. However, we really need to grow. I personally need to grow even more. And I recognize this, and I have mentors and coaches that are helping me to scale my personal business and scale me to a point where I attract the type of donors and donations that we need in order to grow and scale Unsilenced Voices to a point where we can impact thousands and thousands, not just in the US, however, worldwide as well.
Wow. So it's also very by the way, you're doing it right now just by sharing, which is great. And you've got so many different projects in the works with your personal business and Unsilenced Voices and all of that, which we're going to talk about towards the end. So don't worry, guys, you're going to be able to hear all about it, and you'll hear about it throughout as well. I want to talk to you about a couple things. And the first thing I want to ask you is, you mentioned 1 in 3 women, and we read the statistic, are experiencing domestic violence, sexual assault. And you, at the very beginning, when you were pushed into that wall and your head goes through the wall, and you turn around afterwards and you think to yourself, I've got to patch up that wall. Not I've got to break free, but I've got to patch up that wall. It didn't even register, right? Yeah. So there's a lot of people out there right now who it's not registering for them. And that number might even be higher. We just don't know because they don't know it. I'm curious, when did it transition from I've got to patch up that wall to I've got to escape this situation that I found myself in?
October of 2012, I received a 4-hour-long beating from my abuser. And this was extreme physical violence. And the next morning, I woke up to him holding my hand. And as soon as I opened my bloodshot eyes, one of my eyes was completely black. And for 9 months later, people thought I had jaundice because it just turned yellow. It didn't completely heal. He was bawling, and he said, "Please forgive me. I promise I will never do this again." This is the apology stage in the stages of domestic violence. And I started to understand then that this is so unhealthy. This is not good. And I needed to figure out a way out. I was scared to leave at that time. I believed a lot of his manipulation. So I stayed, but I stayed consciously aware of what was happening and subconsciously figuring out a way to break free from the situation. So it took me a few years after that. Multiple other situations had happened, of course, where I finally had not only the courage to leave, but I had an opportunity to break free. So I wasn't working. I was relying on him. There was this back and forth shift with our relationship. And still to this day, I've learned forgiveness. So I hope that he listens to me speaking up. I hope that he hears what I went through and my side of the story, so that he has actually taken an initiative to heal himself, because hurt people hurt people. And I hope and pray that he doesn't do it again. And I also hope that this inspires other abusers to really take action so that they can own up to what it is that they have done, so that they don't hurt anybody in the future. But when I had that opportunity to leave, I took it, and I actually left about 6 or 7 different times before finally leaving. And that statistic is normal, very, very normal in abusive situations, because the words that you hear have longer lasting implications than that of physical violence. So the manipulation, the Jekyll and Hyde personality, the derogatory language that he or she, this could be a man or a woman, uses, in my case, Paul, we'll call him, it stuck with me, and I believed those lies. I believed that I wasn't good enough. I believed I couldn't find anybody better. I believed that he was my Prince Charming and the best I was going to get, because of the constant repetitive nature of his words. So I stayed, and that's why most people stay. And when I finally had that opportunity to leave permanently, I did. I took it.
I've never been in a situation like that, which I'm grateful for, and I know many people are. And I can only imagine that when in a situation like that, it's extremely scary. It is, especially if you're financially dependent on that individual. Now you're not only thinking of how am I going to leave, but you're also thinking, how am I going to support myself, especially if the person leaving that situation doesn't have family they can rely on, friends they can lean on, programs they can lean on, especially depending on where they come from in the world. I'm curious, when you had that pivotal moment after that 4-hour experience that you went through, where did you seek help? How did you begin to move yourself out of this situation? What resources did you go to? And I know this is a very loaded question, but do you remember the first person that you spoke to about this situation?
I can answer that one a lot easier. So after that 4-hour long beating in October, this was October of 2012, I didn't know what to do. So there wasn't an action that was taken immediately after that first beating. So if you're listening and if this is something that's resonating with you or even triggering you, take a deep breath, because I know that a lot of my story is very triggering to victims and survivors. However, when that happened and the next morning I woke up to him apologizing, I stayed. I believed he was going to change. He told me that he would go through therapy. We started counseling here and there, not really doing much, right? He was just placating me in a sense, subconsciously, right? His subconscious was making sure that I was staying. However, I started to speak to somebody. Now, I was lying to everybody else in my life. I was lying about the bruises. I was telling people everything was A-okay. I was lying to my parents, and my mom and my dad were the closest people in my life. And I didn't tell them what was happening. So there was this woman, we'll call her Sue. I don't want to say her real name. We'll call her Sue. But there was this woman that knew him and knew me. And as soon as she saw bruises on me, she said, "Shell, what is going on?" And I remember she would meet me behind the local Kmart, and we would sit there and have cigarettes. I'm not a smoker right now. I haven't smoked for a long, long time. However, during that time, I was so stressed. I was looking for anything to numb this pain, right? Cigarettes, alcohol, you name it. So I would meet her behind that Kmart and I would smoke with her, and she would encourage me. She would tell me to hide credit cards in my boots when I went out. She would tell me, when you see him reacting a certain way, step back, leave, give him breath. There were multiple things that she tried to help coach me with. And she was the very first person that I spoke to. And it was because of her that I had a credit card with me months later when he had attacked me in public over New Year's and slammed my head against a cement bench. And it was because of her that I had that credit card with me to be able to get a hotel room for the night instead of going back to our house where I probably would have been harmed even worse. So there were a lot of things that happened, and I don't talk about this, Brandon. You're actually getting this out of me that a lot of other podcasters don't. But I was very grateful for her, and after that, when things started progressing and I started gaining my self-confidence back, that's when I started to really reach out to counseling, therapy, started to understand and realize some things, and then started to really piece together my exit.
Wow, she was such a blessing that you had in your life.
Yeah.
And now you get to be that blessing for so many other people. So shout out to her, whoever that is, who helped you behind that Kmart all those times. When it comes to that chapter of your life, the knowingness of, wow, I'm in this situation, I've got to get out. You now find this individual who was coaching you and helping you. Did you begin going to counseling and therapy while you were still with him?
Oh yeah. We did. We tried couples. We went individually, and it took a long time for me to understand what I was going through. So I would hide some things from my first therapist, and I didn't tell her to the full extent what was happening. And for him, for Paul, he thought there was something wrong with me, or at least he made me believe that there was something wrong with me. So when I went to counseling or therapy, then I would always, what's wrong with me? Why is he acting like that? Why am I triggering him? So I was asking the wrong questions. It's very similar to asking the questions to ChatGPT, for example, right now. You have to ask the right questions in order to get the right answers.
Yes.
So I was asking the wrong questions, and I wasn't really diving into what was happening to me. So I was really believing he was going to change. Well, eventually, after another year, really, I found a therapist, and I can actually name him. His name is Douglas Gosney. He's an amazing therapist. He actually wrote the foreword to my book. And he really started to make me understand what I was going through. We started diving into more of my childhood, more of situations that happened in my life that led me to attract or be attracted to somebody who was extremely manipulative and narcissistic. And we kind of dove into that healing process. And I finally had the last straw, which was November of 2015, where he had put another woman's head through a window, and I really had to break free from that. So he had cheated on me prior to that. I knew about this. We wanted to stay connected. He wanted to continue controlling me, is what happened. And then I found out that he had assaulted somebody else. And that's when I really had a decision to make. And that's when I started this whole process, the book, the play, the speaking up. And, I was scared, Brandon. I was so scared. I remember I was working as a bartender, and I remember every night at 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning, coming back to my apartment, and I lived on the third story. And I remember hitting the elevator button to go up to that third story. And I had dreams and visions and nightmares so often that when those doors opened, that he or somebody would be standing there with a gun to kill me.
Yes.
And I did it anyway. I spoke up anyway because I knew that my voice mattered, not only to me, to the other woman, and then to all of you listeners out there.
Like you said, this mission is so much bigger than you, and you're leading this movement. But again, this is a movement that you are leading, and there's danger that comes along with that, but there's much more good than danger that comes along with it. What was that final moment? Because you mentioned that you moved back in with this individual, and then you left, and then you moved back, then you left. Yeah. What was the final break free moment? I know you mentioned it was when they assaulted someone else, but what was the moment that you said, I'm leaving, I'm breaking free?
So he was getting better. And this is where the cycle is really interesting. So he didn't physically assault me for almost a whole year. And so we were trying to work things out. I was really believing that things were going to get better. And he was, assuring me things are better. And he was going to counseling and all this, which he wasn't. He wasn't actually following through. I had a hard time sleeping. And every now and then I still have a hard time sleeping. I'm just going to be completely honest. And I woke up and he was snoring. And I was like, okay. So I got up and I grabbed a pillow and I went to the living room. And I opened up the computer. And it's his computer. So I opened up the computer and all of a sudden this message from Facebook Messenger popped up. And it was this woman talking about her affair that she was having with him. And I started to read because I couldn't stop reading. And I just started reading and I lost it. And then I woke him up and it was this whole escapade. And I drowned myself in a bottle for the next week, throwing up, and he was holding my hair back. And I didn't think it was going to hurt you this bad, and blah, 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 blah. And he actually let me go back to Los Angeles, where he wanted me to heal so I could come back. But really what happened is I started to really understand this is not good. Yeah. And then I stayed in LA, and months later is when I found out he had assaulted somebody else. And that's when I was like, this is enough. No more communication. I contacted an attorney. So I actually sued my abuser for domestic violence. The statute of limitations for the criminal lawsuit was over, but for civil lawsuit, my attorney and I found a stipulation where we could sue him civilly, and I took my power back that way.
That's great that you were able to create that distance between you and them. And I know there's people listening who it's not possible to create that distance, whether it's because of financially or, some people, I'm sure you were afraid even when you woke him up to confront him
Oh, yeah.
about this act with this other individual, that could trigger another one of those situations that you've been through so many other times. So kudos to you for being able to break free. And obviously that was the breaking moment, but there was much that led up to that, which I'm going to ask you about for those who are currently in the midst of domestic abuse, sexual assault. You mentioned building your self-confidence over that time through the help of mentors and through other methods maybe that you can share. But I'm curious now that you're free, okay? And now this is 2015, 2016 era. Okay. When did you say, I am going to create this play called But I Love Him, that then turned into a memoir / book for people? Like, when did that happen? Because that's a giant step from talking to someone about your experience, breaking free from it, and then now sharing it with the world. That's a very different thing.
Yeah. God is able to turn broken pieces into beautiful things. And I was very broken. And this encouragement to write from my therapist really helped to heal me. But with my theater arts background, it came out in a play format. And God kind of opened the door for me to go see this woman. Her name is Jessica Lynn Johnson. She was the director of my play, an amazing director. And she had this free class, and she still does a Saturday free class. So I'm plugging Jessica right now. And it's virtual, right? So I start going to this class, and this was way pre-COVID. So it wasn't virtual, it was live. And I remember sitting there with my arms crossed, just kind of watching, and people were like, tell your story. And so I said, okay, I'm going to start to tell my story. And I started to write, right? So you had mentioned something, if there were other modalities that helped to heal me, that helped to increase my self-confidence, and journaling was one of them. So in that relationship, I actually kept a journal. I still have it, and it helped me to write my book, But I Love Him. A lot of my journal entries are actually in this book, but the journaling really helped to alleviate some of the pain that was happening underneath. So when I was free from him and I started to document my situation, it naturally kind of came out in this play format, and Jessica helped to craft that for me. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know that I was creating this play. I didn't know I was going to write this book. I didn't know I was going to start a nonprofit. I didn't know any of this was going to happen. It just, God was opening these doors, and I just kept saying yes. And that's something to remember, is that sometimes God opens the doors for us, and it might be a different door than what we're asking for. But he is opening that door for us to escape, for us to express ourselves, for us to do something in spite of or because of what it is that we're going through, because he can turn these broken pieces into beautiful things. And when I started to write and document, I started to heal. And then with the play, I literally beat myself up day in and day out. And this was when I left him that first time and found out about the affairs. That's when I started to write. That's when I met Jessica. November was when I found out about this other woman. And then I performed that play 3 months later in a theater in 2016.
Wow. Things happen so quickly. And then when you perform that play, when was But I Love Him published for the masses?
So I was in a lawsuit with my abuser. I pitched my book to over 170 publishers. Nobody wanted to touch it because my abuser came from money. So they were worried that they were going to get sued. There were multiple things. There was one publisher who actually gave me a response to the book, said, I love it. I want to be involved in it. Here's some edits that I want you to make. He slept on it, called me the next day and said, I'm backing out because I'm scared your abuser is going to come hurt me. So I made those edits, and I remember settling our case. My book was done before I published. So my book was probably done early 2018. And I sat on it because my attorney and the lawsuit, and all this going on. And I said, screw it. I want to publish this book. So we settled our case right after I published. So I published in, I believe it was February of 2019, and I self-published on KDP, Amazon. And just a few months later, we settled. And I'm not actually allowed to talk about the settlement, but I'm glad I published the book before the settlement, because it gave me a platform and a voice to be able to still continue educating and serving.
Yes, absolutely. Congratulations on the launch of But I Love Him and all that you're doing now. And when people read this book, and by the way, there's links in the description, guys, to But I Love Him, so you can check out the book for yourself. You can also, if you're listening and you don't have the description, you can go to michellejewsbury.com. That's also going to be in the description. When you were writing it, and even when you were in the midst of putting together the play, what was your main outcome for those who either watched the play or read the book, where when they read it, they'll take away this one main thing, that the main message that you wanted to convey to them?
When I first wrote the play, I didn't have an ROI for the audience. I did it really for me. And I wrote it and performed it so that I could express myself. Because when I was trapped in that abusive relationship, I was not able to express myself. So I didn't really have, like I said, I didn't know all this was going to happen. So I didn't intentionally decide I have to showcase this so that my audience heals. I literally did it so that I could heal. And it's very interesting because I have a woman right now who is part of our anthology. So we just launched an anthology. We sold out within a month. So super excited. We have one spot left, but I'm sure I'll sell that out in a couple days. But this anthology project, it's called Breaking the Silence, Voices of Survivors. It's a book collaboration we're going to be publishing the end of the year. And there's this one woman who said, I just want to write the book so I can express myself. And it reminds me so much of me writing my play and writing my first book. So when I wrote my book, transitioning from the play to the book, what I wanted was just to be able to tell other people what I went through, because so many others are going through it too. So they're not alone. That was my number one intention. They're not alone. I need to get this out. I want to publish, right? I want to get this out. And lo and behold, it turned into this movement that you keep mentioning and talking about. And, God is good. God is wonderful and great. And he's been able to use my voice. And because of that play, I healed rapidly, because it was feeling in order to heal. And we teach this. You have to feel in order to heal. You can't just push back all this trauma that we've experienced. You can't say, hey, I'm okay, and pop your collar and be just fine. You have to feel those painful moments, express yourself through movements or plays or reading or writing or hiking or whatever it is, traditional or non-traditional healing modalities, in order to actually start to really feel better. And from there, that's when I started to really get some confidence and be like, I can do this. And there's people coming up to me, and there's people encouraging me to continue. And I'm going to listen to what God is telling me to do as best as I can. So,
yes,
that was a long-winded answer to your question.
Well, it goes to show that just by sharing your story, it can help so many people to navigate through their own story and their own journey. And you've mentioned God a lot through this conversation. Yeah. And I'm curious personally, have you always had a very strong relationship with God?
No. So in 2010, I found God, and I was actually experimenting a lot with drugs and alcohol back then. So I was high on cocaine, and I was lying on a bed and looking up at a ceiling fan, trying to go to sleep because my heart was going 1,000 miles a minute. And I said, whatever's out there, whoever's out there, I promise I'll stop this. I just need help. And I heard an answer.
Whoa.
And that is my God story. There were multiple things that happened prior to that, multiple things that have happened since then. I tell you what, some spiritual craziness has happened in my life, which that's something I should write about. But I heard an answer, and that's when I started to go to this church, and I would walk in smelling of bourbon from the night before, and they still loved me and said, "Hey, do you want to help with the kids?" Because I love kids. I've always loved kids. And I'm like, yes. And I mean, I literally still smelled of alcohol, and they still said, we love you and we want to be with you. And I had a really great introduction to God. And my abusive relationship came after that, which is crazy. Wow. So I found God in 2010, and I got involved in an abusive relationship in 2012. And throughout that relationship, I would scream at God, why is this happening? And I feel like I have a very outspoken, conversational relationship with Christ. And I'm definitely not a Bible thumper by any means, because I come from a very non-traditional background. But I think I'm the type of person that he uses to be able to spread his message, because I'm not from the faith per se, but I found a relationship, and he carried me through it. Looking back, he was there carrying me through it. And he is there now, blowing my mind with what is happening because of.
I wanted to ask you that when we first started the conversation, before we even recorded, you mentioned that you have a daily prayer where you pray, blow my mind.
Yeah.
Where did that come from? I think that's fascinating.
Yeah, I don't know. I have a lot of big dreams and big visions, not just for Unsilenced Voices, for my business as well. I love speaking on stages. I remember years ago I did Amway, and being at the foot of the stage and not looking at the speakers, but looking at the audience and seeing thousands of people in the audience. And I was like, I want this. And I think that comes from my acting background as well. But getting into speaking, getting into coaching, running an organization, all of these things, I so desire to impact even more people. Because if my voice has healed one, my voice can heal more. And then we can create a domino effect of change, and other people can speak up, and other people can heal. And who knows, maybe we can stop all these injustices, right? That's my dream. But I said, God, please help me create this vision I see in my head. Please, open these doors, and please blow my mind. Just blow my mind with the lifestyle that I desire to live, the stages I desire to speak on, the people that I get to impact and serve and love. I mean, there's a picture behind me of this is Ghana. And then over here, this is part of my team in Sierra Leone, and our girls in Sierra Leone on this other side. And we get to impact so many young people who have experienced horrible things. I mean, from human trafficking to sexual abuse as children to domestic violence that's gone on for multiple years, and not just Africa, but all over the world. And I really desire to be in 100 different countries and multiple $1 million organizations, so that we can impact even more. So that's why I pray that, God, blow my mind, please.
Yes. Something beautiful happens, I found, just from the conversations I've had on this show, with people who are religious, people who aren't religious, people who call God something different, people who call it infinite intelligence, the universe, whatever it may be. But something special happens when you're able to give yourself to a higher power, whatever that higher power is for you. And when you're able to have, like what you mentioned, dialogue and conversations with this higher power, and just look at what is happening in your life and happening around you with your organizations and with your mission, and just look at your life now and look at it where it began, this last chapter of your life. And there's been many chapters since, but especially the chapter that began once you broke free in that 2016 era. And it's been how many years now? It's been 7 years since then.
Not very many.
Yeah. And not that many at all. And it just goes to show how much your life can change in only a short amount of time. And I hope that that's comforting for those listening, that a year from now, your life could be completely different and transformed in a very positive way. And before I ask you what you're working on now and the new projects that you have in the works, and you've already mentioned one, I'd like to ask, for the person listening right now who recognizes that they're in an abusive relationship or in a situation similar to the one that you mentioned, and they say to themselves, wow, I've never listened to anything like this before. I'm ready to make moves in the right direction because I want to be alive a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now. I have big goals, big dreams for my life, and I don't want to experience this. I know that I'm meant for more. What would you say to that person and recommend, or what advice would you give to them for the first step they make in that positive direction?
So the most dangerous time in any abusive relationship is when the victim decides that she wants to leave or he wants to leave. When I say most dangerous, this is where most deaths happen. So strategically planning your exit strategy is very, very important. So what I mean by this is, don't threaten your abuser, I'm going to leave. I'm going to pack my bags and leave right now, because the physical and emotional and sexual abuse could grow at that time. And I remember one time in particular in my abusive situation, I said this, I'm like, I'm going to leave. And he said, you're not allowed to leave with any of the clothes that you're wearing, because he believed he owned me. He bought me clothes. He bought me shoes. He bought my car for me. He's like, you can't leave with the car. You can't leave with any of this. So I literally stripped down to walk out that door naked, and he still wouldn't let me leave. And it blew up, of course, into a physical altercation, and I was trapped, right? I was stuck there. So when I finally made the decision to get out, I had to plan. I started to put money away. So I didn't have a job at this time, and I would clean up his clothes in the morning after things have been thrown around, right? And he always had some money in his pockets. So I would just start hiding some of this money, making myself a piggy bank. I knew where my important documents were, the clothes that I wanted to take, like all this stuff was in my head. I knew what I had to do. I started to make double payments from our account to the car, my car, in order for me to have a vehicle when I left. And he didn't notice this. It was, his business was paying this. So I did this intentionally for a year, ladies and gentlemen, before I left. For a year, I was intentionally double paying the car so I would have a vehicle, so it wouldn't be taken away from me. And finally, the moment that it took was I was in a therapy session, and she said, you got to get out. And this was before I had met Douglas. And I went home, and he was running late, and he was running a few hours late. And I remember my heart was going 1,000 miles a minute, and now's the time. Now is my opportunity to leave. So I just started throwing clothes in my car and started grabbing everything I could. And I remember I was like, I got to go. And then getting on that road scared. I mean, my heart was going 1,000 miles a second. I didn't want him to catch me. I was so scared that he was going to come home and just grab me by the hair and just hurt me. And I escaped, and I left. And I left with those clothes, and I left with the car, and I left. And what I encourage you, if you are experiencing abuse, you strategize. Make sure to strategize. There's this woman I spoke to, and I know we're coming to a close here pretty soon, and I'm trying to speak faster. Sorry, Brandon. But I remember I spoke to this woman yesterday on the phone, and she has been in a relationship with her abuser for 17 years. She's got 5 kids, and the law isn't necessarily that friendly to victims when they first leave, especially with their children. So I was encouraging her in non-traditional ways. So probably not what a case manager would tell her to do. I was telling her what to do. You've got to plan. You can't tell your kids what you're going to be doing. You can't tell the people who are close to your abuser what you're planning in your head. You've got to make sure that he's away. You've got to plan this exit so he doesn't know it's coming, so that you can exit safely and reach out to organizations. We're an organization, but a lot of what we do is advocacy and education and awareness What you want is an organization that has shelter, has case managers, and we will grow to that point. However, those are what is important for when you are exiting. And we have a list on our website, unsilencedvoices.org. You can go to the resources section. Again, unsilencedvoices.org. Whether you are in Mississippi or Idaho or Illinois, there's a resource for you someplace. We have a list of resources throughout the U.S. There's a list in my book, too. There's a list of resources at the back of my book as well, different organizations. Or if you're even internationally, right, figuring out a way to leave safely, but it is all strategic planning.
Yes, creating that plan. And it's different to receive, and like you were mentioning with this individual you were helping, it's different to receive advice from someone who's been in it than someone who hasn't been in it. And that doesn't discredit the value you can receive from that relationship with someone who is still there for you, still wants to support you. But I know that you do this for people and you work with people as a coach, and you've got different programs and personalized coaching that's available to people, as well as the resource section that you mentioned, which again, guys, unsilencedvoices.org. A link is in the description for you to check out their website, as well as all the resources they will link you to. So I'd like to ask you now, how do you help people when it comes to coaching? And for someone who's never had coaching or even therapy or counseling or anything, what does it look like to work with you as a coach?
Yeah. So the coaching I was talking about with this woman, that was more unsilenced voices service, right? So somebody reaches out to me, they're involved in an abusive situation. I will guide them and help them, or our team will guide them and help them. As far as my business and coaching in my business, it's a lot of business and personal development. So we encourage you, whether you have gone through sexual abuse or childhood abuse, domestic violence, a trauma, cancer survivor, homicide survivor, you name it, a trauma that you've experienced that has changed your life and maybe has inhibited you. We encourage you to use your situations to create businesses, movements, nonprofits, missions, ministries. Encourage you to use your voice to make a difference. So we teach you how to launch, grow, and build a nonprofit organization. We teach you how to launch, grow, and build a business. I'm able to really use my firsthand experience in what I went through drugs and alcohol, through my domestic violence relationship, through moving. I'm an adult orphan right now as well. And my daddy died in 2015 and my mommy in 2019, and how that impacts us and how we can use our stories to not silence us, but to unsilence us so that we can make a difference in the lives of the people around us. And that's really what I talk about. So in business lectures, I talk a lot about, there's say 500 people in the audience, 1,000 people in the audience. Over 60% of those people have experienced something in their life that may be inhibiting to them. We've heard the statistics of just domestic violence issues. So we really help you to transform your life into something even better, right? Using your story to speak life and speak truth into other people.
That's incredible. Amazing. And I know you're working on a new book right now that is scheduled to be out by the end of this year, which, by the way, we've got to have you on the show at that time to talk about that, as well as other personal development and sharing your story and using your story as fuel to help other people. So tell us about your upcoming book. Okay.
So I'm going to tell you about the one we just published with Unsilenced Voices. So we published a curriculum called Graced for Prosperity. And it's all about faith, purpose, finance. So being able to really recover from domestic violence and human trafficking and sexual abuse, and being able to have tangible things to do in order to be able to live your life. So this is really a training from Unsilenced Voices. We've partnered with a wonderful woman. Her name was Misty Kerrigan to help write this curriculum. So if you're an organization and you want this, we're actually gifting it for free. Go to our website and you can get the workbook and the trainer's manual along with a PowerPoint. All these are digital on our website, unsilencedvoices.org. We did publish, of course, on Amazon. So if you want the hard copy, then you can purchase it on Amazon. I am finishing my second full-length book right now called Your Ultimate Breakthrough. We plan to pitch to publishers. When I say we, my editor and I, but it is almost done. So super excited about that. The same time that we are publishing my next full-length manuscript, we are publishing our anthology, which I briefly talked about earlier, called Breaking the Silence, Voices of Survivors. We have 20 authors who have come together from all different backgrounds. We've got human trafficking, domestic violence, homicide, cancer, really some in-depth stories. We've got this woman who was trafficked and held hostage, and there's so many different stories, but it's all about breaking the silence. It's all many of these authors, it's their first time publishing anything, and they get a full chapter in this book. And we plan to turn this into multiple volumes, so very similar to Chicken Soup for the Soul. So I met Mark Victor Hansen and Crystal Hansen, amazing individuals. Cool. However, I want it to be trauma informed. I want people to read real life stories and say, hey, if they were able to escape, I can too. If they went through this, I can too. I can overcome, right? So that's what this book is all about. So it's this 20 author anthology, which will be released, we're hoping in December, and then getting them on stages and speaking. And so it's really exciting. I'm very, very excited for that. And then with Unsilenced Voices, of course, we have our Sponsor a Survivor program. We have 26 girls in Sierra Leone that we sponsor that has gone through abuses, lots of abuses. I'm not going to identify every single one of them, but there's so much that these girls have experienced. And they go through what's called Matilda's program, which is our program to help these girls go through vocational training and materials. And we pay for a monthly stipend, give them medicals and counseling. And all of this is $3.33 a day. So go to sponsораsurvivor.org. Again, sponsораsurvivor.org. And you can sponsor a survivor. It's $100 a month, so $3.33 a day. And you'll get quarterly updates from your sponsored survivor and get information that way as well. And then I've got a lot of coaching projects. We do Legacy Camp. I do personalized one-on-one coaching as well. So you can go to michellejewsbury.com for that information.
Wow. Yeah. How amazing. All of those different initiatives. And for those listening, you know which one will resonate most with you. So again, links are in the description to all of those. But I would just like to say that if you rewind a minute and a half or so, guys, when Michelle was talking about all the different initiatives and projects and the anthology and the program with Unsilenced Voices and your new book that's releasing, the energy and the vibrancy. And if you're watching, then you certainly saw Michelle smile when she was talking about those things. You literally lit up. And it's fantastic and inspiring to see this human that you are now, because I didn't know you then. And we were strangers before this, but to see your energy and the light that you give off, I just know that, and you know that you're helping so many people, not just survivors of domestic abuse, sexual assault, but you're helping people to use their story and to find themselves and to create a plan forward for themselves in their life in so many different ways. And as a stranger, I'm super proud of you for all that you were doing. You're on the right track. You're doing the right things. And I'm greatly inspired by all that you're doing. So I thank you for sharing your story vulnerably, which takes a lot in itself. And I thank you for coming on the show to talk about your story and everything that you're working on, Michelle.
Thank you, Brandon. And I like to end every podcast with one thing, if I could, real fast.
Please.
There is a movie called Finding Nemo. And in Finding Nemo, there's Dory. And Dory is this blue fish. She's kind of an airhead. And she swims around. She gets lost all the time. And she always has this great personality. But the one thing that she always sings to herself is just keep swimming. Just keep swimming. Just keep swimming. So if you are listening and if this has resonated with you, I want to encourage you to just keep swimming.
Amazing. And that's the same quote that you include in your email signature.
Yeah. Actually, I'm not sure if that one is any longer, but yeah.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
I love it. It's powerful. Thank you, Michelle, for coming on, sharing your story, sharing that ending quote, and all the resources that you're providing. It's been a pleasure chatting with you on the broadcast.
Thank you so much.
No matter what your situation, no matter where you are, no matter whether you are a victim currently of domestic abuse or sexual assault, or maybe you're just someone who's looking to take that next step in your life personally to use your story, whether traumatic or not, to influence and impact the world in a positive way. I know that this conversation with Michelle will have been helpful for you. Again, there are links to everything that we talked about in the description for Unsilenced Voices, for Michelle's website, for information on where you can grab Michelle's book, which is titled But I Love Him, which is also in the description. So be sure to check out all those different resources. This has been such an inspirational conversation with Michelle Jewsbury. I hope that you loved it too. If you did, all that we ask is you share this show with just one other person who could use it as well. You're the reason this show has grown over the course of the past 2 years to nearly 300 episodes, which is mind-blowing. So thank you for being the best part of the Be Better team. Until we talk again next time, continue to be better.